I was born in 1950. I grew up in Linwood, California, in a very Catholic family. Made my first communion there, all the rites of passage for a Catholic family in the 1950s. My father worked at Sears as a salesman. My mom was a housewife. And I had two brothers, one older, one younger, and one sister who was the baby. Most of the kids I knew from school were families of 8, 10, 12 kids. I think from an early age, I knew there was something different. Going out behind the garage in the alley, pulling down your pants. I didn't care about the girls. I cared about the boys. So at first, I think, in trying to normalize myself, I thought, well, everybody's attracted to same-sex individuals. That's what sin is. It's just that other people are better at avoiding sin than I am. Into my 8th grade class, they would bring different religious orders of priests and nuns every week. And I remember thinking, well, I don't think I want to get married to a woman. I'd rather live with a group of men. So maybe I should be a priest. Maybe that's what God is telling me. God made me this way, so I'd be a priest. So that was my thinking on it. And so I joined the seminary. It took a year and it was just, no. In 1968, at 17, 18, I knew I was gay. And I knew what it meant to be gay. And I read up enough about all the discrimination and everything else. So I knew that enough to keep my mouth shut. Everybody tries to fit in. Nobody wants to be an outcast in society, or nobody strives to be an outcast. I don't think an outcast in society. So yeah, I wanted to be liked. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be accepted. So I played the game. Yeah, there came a point where marriage was on the table and it was like, oh my God, what did I do? And I broke up with her. Actually, she started dating another friend of mine that I had introduced her to. So probably 3-year relationship in high school, but it wasn't sexual. Yeah. Graduated high school and went to East Los Angeles Junior College. It was during college that I went and worked at a soup kitchen in downtown LA. And a lot of the people there were long-haired hippies. And so the guys on the streets called it the hippie kitchen. And we served maybe 1,000 people a day. And it was all food that we took out of trash cans. In those days, down at the produce market in downtown LA, if you have 2 or 3 tomatoes that are rotten in a case of tomatoes, you throw the case of tomatoes away. What we did, we went in and gleaned all the tomatoes, the good ones, and we fed 1,000 people with quote unquote garbage. We were very political. We were always getting arrested, anti-war, anti-this. And I was part of a group that went to court. Out of that eventually came the Good Samaritan law that food is date stamped and donated when it's past its date, and that supermarkets are not held liable if someone gets sick off of the food. Anyway, that was something that we were very involved in back then. I graduated in 72. And I went to Alaska for a year and taught in a school up in the little village called St. Mary's, Alaska. So I moved up to San Francisco and joined the Catholic worker community there, became once again very political, getting arrested, anti-nuclear, gay rights. At that time, there was a bill in the California legislature, the Briggs Initiative, basically said that anyone who was found out to be gay or lesbian would be fired from being a teacher, and if any straight teacher supported them, they would also be fired. Harvey wanted to recruit people to work against that. So I went into his camera shop on Castro and went on some bus trips into the Central Valley and other places that were not so gay, and to register people. We won. It did not pass. And it was really after I came back in 74 that I started dating and really coming out to myself and socially and to my parents at the urging of Harvey Milk, who said if everybody here came out, then everybody in the United States would know someone who was gay and this Briggs Initiative would not pass. Well, I wrote a letter and sent it to my parents and about 40 or 50 relatives and everybody else. I came out. And that was there was no putting the door back after that. My parents were confused. My dad, who, as I said, was always very religious, but was always a very gentle man, said, I don't know what you're telling me. I don't understand. All I know is that you're my son and I love you. And I thought, wow, that was pretty intense. And so My parents, who had never gotten on a plane before in their life, or never gone anywhere, got on a plane, came up to San Francisco, where I was at the time at the Catholic Worker, and spent a week with me, following me. I took them to gay bars. I took them to a dignity meeting. I took them to the kitchen with the homeless to cut vegetables. I took them everywhere. So my parents were accepting. My sister was accepting. She was very young. My two brothers, they were standoffish. They didn't want to talk about it. I worked in the Tenderloin in San Francisco with elderly alcoholics. I got knifed one time with a razor knife in the Tenderloin. It was a rough area, but I learned a lot there. I was walking home one day in the Tenderloin, and I saw all the fire engines in an old San Francisco SRO, single room occupancy. A lot of poor people would live in those rooms. And there was a couple that were my clients, an elderly Greek couple. She was blind and he had a goiter and couldn't walk. And I looked and I saw Mrs. Chatros on the 10th floor. I said, "Did you get everybody out?" "Yeah, no, there's somebody up there." So young and stupid, I ran into the burning building, and thank God 4 firemen followed me and went up the 10 flight and got Mrs. Chatros and her husband out, and we carried him down the stairs, and it was quite dramatic. The flames were sort of whipping up the wall. That was the days before when they had the open stairwells that were like, there's a name for it, hurricane, that San Francisco then made them close off because it became a fire fume that would just, like a candle, the buildings went up. Got an award from Dianne Feinstein. Crazy times in San Francisco. I was sort of tired of the big city, and I moved to Spokane, Washington, and it was nice, but it was very, very racist and very conservative. I learned the culture, learned that you went in the back door into gay bars in Spokane and you parked your car 2 blocks away because good Christians were there taking license plates numbers and giving them to the police. Even in 1980, it was still a little risky. An opportunity came up to get my master's of social work through Eastern Washington University. After that, I went to work for a hospital, Deaconess Medical Center. It was on the respiratory floor that AIDS cases first started coming in 1983. And we first started getting people presenting with pneumocystis carinii pneumonia. And so they went to the 7th floor, respiratory floor, and words spread around that it was these gay people and they had this disease and nobody knew how it was transmitted, so no nurses would help them. They were isolated. I started getting trays and feeding them, especially people that might have paralysis in their hands. So using my social work training, I called a friend who was at Community Mental Health, called a friend who was at the state evaluations for state disability, called a friend who was at the visiting nurse, home visiting nurses, called a friend who was a doctor at the hospital that had many of the cases, called them all together to my living room, and we created the Spokane AIDS Network quietly. Because there were many forces who did not want us to create the Spokane AIDS Network. So we did. And so we had this little secret case management organization. I'd say when somebody was coming out of the hospital, I'd alert people in the various visiting nurse and everything else. And we'd sort of coordinate in a case management sort of thing. But we had the clients sign releases. We were very legal. And we sort of helped people that way. I got calls to go to Lewiston, Idaho, all over the place where people were isolated and being beaten because they, started having pneumocystis pneumonia and therefore were given a diagnosis of AIDS. And the communities usually went crazy, very crazy, very crazy. I had my windshield bashed out 3 times by people. And I also had the Aryan Nations were over in Hayton Lake, Idaho, about 26 miles away. They came and burned a cross on my front lawn because I went public in an attempt to really help people get the word out. It came out of the bars and into the streets, not the gay people, but the information about the Spokane AIDS Network. And got a few harassing, more than harassing, phone calls. And then Aryan Nation showed up on my doorstep one night and, told me stop her. So, that's when I learned from the police how to figure out if there was a bomb under my car and learned how to disarm it and all. I also learned how to disarm weapons, which I'd never held a gun in my life, and they taught me how to do that just in case. I'm still here and the Aryan Nations are gone. A lawsuit came about and robbed them of every cent they had except 1 penny. So they were basically put out of business by people. After moving to Spokane, I did have two lovers, both of whom died of AIDS. I never became HIV positive, and I think that sort of stunted me. I got really involved in the work, and I would work. I'd be up at 3 a.m, getting somebody, saving them, bringing them to my house who was dying of AIDS, and going to work at 8 a.m. I just put everything into the AIDS work up in Spokane, and I really didn't have time for lovers. I learned how to live by myself. I became very independent, maybe too independent. And I had many, many friends, sexual partners, but a long-term lover, just haven't had. I don't cut off relationships or friendships, but having a deep sexual love relationship just has passed me by, or I let it pass by. So moved from Spokane to LA, to Downey, where my mom was living, and got a job, worked in Rancho in head injury, and started working in South Central LA with gang members, which was not my area of expertise, but I learned a lot real quick. Trust me, teaching gang members how to put condoms on bananas, it gets real quick. uh, anyway, that was fun times. Moved into Long Beach, where I still live, and became involved with AIDS work. I got involved in the AIDS quilt. People would make quilts of friends and family members who died of AIDS as a remembrance. And then those quilts were displayed as a memorial. I had a big display in Washington, D.C. Yeah, it brought a lot of awareness to AIDS in the country. From there, I got a job at Cal State Long Beach, teaching social work for the next 20 years. So that's pretty much how I ended my career. So I retired at 63 in 2013. So I was nominated for the Harvey Milk Equity Wall of Fame. So my name is up on the wall there at the Harvey Milk Park in Long Beach for helping to resettle 25 Ugandan men, women, and children, primarily in Long Beach, but they're now all over the country. I feel that this is a battle for our lives, for our existence. Many of us, I've done a little bit, have fought for the last 50 years to get the rights we have today. Marriage and the right not to be arrested when we go out in public at a gay bar or any bar. You know, we fought for those rights, and those rights are slowly slipping away. And I'm not quite sure how or what, but I see myself being involved somehow in that extended battle. As Harvey Milk said, we got to give that kid in Latuna, Kansas hope. We got to give him hope. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the future is, but I've stepped out in darkness before and found my way, found a path. So I know I'll find a path now. We'll see what happens.